Hello everyone, welcome to Biology in Minutes. In this video, we're going to be talking about the cell membrane. So the cell membrane acts as a boundary between the outside of the cell and the inside. Its main function is to regulate movement. It is composed of a phospholipid bilayer, which is basically just two layers of phospholipids. In the membrane, there are also many proteins attached. One type of protein is the transmembrane protein. It spans from one side of the membrane to the other side. A glycoprotein is found on the surface of a cell membrane. Their job is for communication. Now let's look at movement across a cell membrane. Like I mentioned before, a cell membrane's main job is to regulate movement. We'll be looking at how molecules on either side move across a cell membrane. The black line in the middle right here would be the cell membrane. One side, the left one, will represent the inside of the cell, while the other will represent the outside of the cell. Now let's place these molecules inside and outside of the cell. 6 inside and 2 outside. Let's look at the movement of these molecules. 2 molecules went from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. This is called passive transport, when molecules from a higher concentration go to a lower concentration until equilibrium is reached. There were 6 molecules inside the cell and 4 molecules outside the cell. This means that the inside of the cell is more concentrated because there are more of these molecules. Molecules will travel from the inside of the cell, which is more concentrated, to the outside of the cell, which is less concentrated. When 2 molecules go from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell, the concentration becomes equal. This is called equilibrium, when molecules inside and outside the cell are equal. Passive transport involves molecules going from high to low. In other words, from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. It is also called going down its concentration gradient because the movement does not require any ATP or energy. There are 3 types of passive transport. Remember, passive transport requires no energy. First up is simple diffusion. Simple diffusion is the diffusion of small uncharged or hydrophobic molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration across the cell membrane. The word diffusion means the tendency of particles to spread out. Molecules like CO2, carbon dioxide, and O2, oxygen, are examples of molecules that move by simple diffusion. Next up is facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion is the passive transport of molecules across a cell membrane by protein channels. Facilitated diffusion is basically simple diffusion, but molecules travel through a protein instead of directly through the cell membrane. The arrow on the right shows molecules traveling by simple diffusion, while the red circle represents facilitated diffusion. While simple diffusion involves hydrophobic molecules, facilitated diffusion involves polar molecules, ions, amino acids, and sugars. The last type of passive transport is osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of water from a high concentration to an area of low concentration across the cell membrane. Osmosis is like simple diffusion, but it involves only water. A really important thing to know about osmosis is that water moves to a higher solute concentration. Let's look at a couple of examples. This circle represents the cell. Inside the cell, there is 90% water and 10% salt. Outside the cell, there is also 90% water and 10% salt. Remember, water moves to a higher solute concentration. In this example, the solute is the salt, so water will move to where the salt concentration is the highest. In this example, the salt concentration on both sides of the cell are equal, so water will move inside the cell and outside. This is called isotonic because the cell's volume remains constant. And this is because the solute concentration on both sides are equal. Now let's take a look at another example. In this example, there's 90% water and 10% salt inside the cell. On the outside, there is 60% water and 40% salt. Water will move from the inside to the outside because water will move towards a higher concentration of solute, which is salt. This is called hypertonic. The cell's volume drops because it loses water. And because the cell loses water, the cell will likely shrivel. In this example, 90% water and 10% salt is inside the cell. But 100% water and 0% salt is outside the cell. What will happen is that water will move to a higher solute concentration. So water from the outside will move to the inside because the concentration of salt is higher. This is called hypotonic. The cell's volume increases because it gains water. The cell will likely swell and most likely burst. The diagram here shows a red blood cell in a hypertonic, a isotonic, and a hypotonic solution. You can see how the concentration of water inside and outside the cell affects the cell's survival. You want your cells to be isotonic because if a cell is either hypertonic or hypotonic, they will most likely die. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give the video a thumbs up, or if you learned anything, make sure to subscribe.